Funding for the Stoller Report is made possible by a grant from the First American Title Insurance Company of New York. The First American Corporation is the nation's leading diversified provider of business information products and services that impact the major events of people's lives.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, the host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. The topic of today's broadcast is Residential Developers Forum. My guests include Martin Dunn, President of Dunn Development, Damon Pasolini, Senior Vice President and Partner at Sidney Fettner Associates, Dennis Herman, Managing Member, Beekman International, Adam Weinstein, President of the Phipps Houses Group, Matt Adele, President of Adelco, and last but not least, with his hand on his face, Ron Moelis, Principal at L&M Equity Participants. I have a question. Who can afford to live in New York? 1.1 of 3 million people, 36% are living in housing that they can't afford. Over 600,000, or 20% of the individuals in New York City, spend more than 50% of their income on housing. New York City ranks first in low-income residents who pay more than 50%. Today, I have all of these people who have income, who rent apartments and build apartments in the city. But the city doesn't have enough apartments. And people are moving into the city constantly. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to stay? How are they going to live here? And hopefully, by the end of the show, my audience will have a much better idea of this. Martin, you build a different type of house. You build what we would call affordable. What is an affordable apartment, or what's affordable housing in New York City?
Well, the goal of affordable housing is to be affordable to...
What's affordable?
Well, we have a range of affordabilities in the projects we do. So as an example, we have renting 2 bedrooms from as low as $400 a month up to $800 a month.
So somebody can get a 2-bedroom apartment. Where is this 2-bedroom apartment?
We're mostly building in central Brooklyn, northern Brooklyn, and the Bronx.
And what about you, Mr. Weinstein? I mean,
your original question was, how can people afford to live in New York City? And I think this, it's fair to say this administration has tried to address, this mayoral administration and gubernatorial administration has tried to address that question at different income strata. I mean, we have developers here of luxury apartments, and I think given what we've seen in the marketplace at the high end, the price pressure that we've seen, it's fair to say that there's not enough housing at any price point in the city of New York. My organization, which is Phipps Houses, tries to address, as Martin's does, the lowest income strata in the city of New York. Households who earn below the average New York City incomes.
Okay. For my audience, the average median income in New York is approximately $62,000.
For a family of 4, about approximately $60,000.
$60,000.
We're addressing our housing to fulfill, as is Martin, as is Ron, in many cases, to fulfill
a portion of
housing.
Damon's housing.
Oh, and
when he has
that's
to.
true. The 80-20 housing as well, to address households earning less than 60% of that number, so less than $40,000 for a household of 4.
And under the situation is they shouldn't be paying more than 30% of their annual income for their apartment.
Well, that's the definition of affordable. Affordable is always in the eye of the beholder, but that's the classic definition is 30% of household or 28% of household income for rent or for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
Plus utilities.
Plus utilities, which
Plus
comprises
utilities.
a significant portion now.
But it doesn't always work that way.
So tell me what do you mean it doesn't
really,
work that way?
Because really what you're doing is building that housing, and the rents are set at 30% of the 60% of median. So the person making $35,000, the rent's set at $800 a month for a 2-bedroom approximately, but in order to reach an income band, you have to reach to incomes below that 35. That's just the maximum. So you may reach to people making $25,000 or $30,000.
But isn't that the situation in the city? You know, very few people, and the idea that why I wanted to bring people who build affordable, who bring luxury, is that the biggest problem that I see in New York City is people aren't aware that they can find affordable apartments all over. I mean, there are 5 boroughs to the city. And, you know, people many times say that my show focuses too much on Manhattan. I mean, you're building in Brooklyn, you're building in the Bronx, you have properties in Queens, and we were talking prior to the show about that. Damon, most of your properties are in Manhattan. Dennis's properties are in Manhattan. Matt, everything, but you were going to do something in Long Island City. And Ron, you've built the gamut. You've even gone into Westchester. I mean, but the idea is how do people learn? How do they find out about the opportunities for an affordable apartment? I want people to contact me after the show and contact you and say, I want an apartment in
They could learn by watching your TV show. That's one way. But the other way is...
both the city and the state, their websites have actually become
But what happens?
good.
You know, websites are great. But
there's a huge demand. The problem is we may get 20 applications for every apartment we have. So there's, you know...
20.
More than
20?
That. More than
Depends
that.
on
20?
depends on the
I
location.
mean, let's be... Okay.
And that's with minimal
let me just
marketing.
say, Phipps Houses does, we have about 1,000 apartments that we're developing in some stage of development right now. And we do also marketing for affordable apartments for other developers of 80/20s typically. We did work with Adelco prior.
On the Aspen.
On the Aspen.
We get for 60 affordable homes. That would be the 20% component. We'll probably receive 7,000 to 8,000 applications. Could be 9,000.
So for 60 affordable homes, 7,000 to 8,000 applications.
We are currently renting 71 apartments on Houston and Bowery, and we received 29,000 applications.
Wait a second. 29,000
For 70.
Do they want to have the opportunity to be, because there's a Whole Foods opening up nearby? I mean, which they can't afford to go to, but I mean,
On the Schaefer side, we got 35,000.
Schaefer was the most ever.
But I'm curious, with
35,000,
that,
right.
how many do you have to go through to actually fill? Because what
A
happens,
lot.
I found,
A lot.
we go through for, you know, you have 7,000 applications, but you
would
get...
you explain? We don't want inside baseball. Here is somebody.
How does one find out?
Okay, here is somebody. Okay, let's look at it this way. Damon right now is building a magnificent building on 31st Street, which I'd like you to explain, and then we'll talk about. Tell us about the building.
The building itself is a mixed-use building. There's basically 5 commercial condominiums within the building. The base component is American Cancer Society Hope Lodge and American Cancer Regional Office.
Right. For my audience, the Hope Lodge is basically a no-cost or a very minimal cost program where people who are coming to academic medical centers in New York can have. It's like a Ronald McDonald's for adults.
Correct. And then we bought the land from the Order of the Friars, basically the priests who operate the church next door. We're building them a 5-story rectory. And then the residential component starts on the 13th floor and goes up to the 60th floor.
Now, here's in that component, how many apartments are there going to be?
There'll be 435 apartments, of which 92 will be affordable.
So we have 92 affordable apartments that someone's going to be able to have the opportunity, which was the same situation, Matt.
Similar. We had 60 in the Aston.
Okay, 60 apartments. So there will be a notice in the New York Times or the Post or maybe the Sun or one of the local newspapers.
Well, actually, all over the Irish Echo,
Right.
a wide variety of
The Chief.
newspapers, as many as we, I think there's
Workman's
5 or
Fold.
6.
Amsterdam News.
Right. So there'll be all the notice will be there, and besides that, so the notice. How does somebody apply? They send in a card, Ron? How do they
there's
apply for the lottery?
There's a lottery system.
Yeah, but how's the lottery? I mean,
They send in a request for an application, and at least in our case, and I'm sure in others, we have people processing those requests, sending out applications, and then there's a post office box where the application is returned to, and at the lottery date, which is usually 60 days, 45 to 60 days after the ads are in the paper, we go to the post office and pull the bags, usually a lot of them with a representative or a group of representatives from the city, and we pull envelopes out of the bags
So there's someone
and log everybody in.
There's someone supervising the lottery
Yes.
from the city,
Yes.
and they're logging that in. So that's the name, and then there's the qualification. The qualification.
The biggest problem, by the way, is not so much people finding out, because we get a lot of, you asked how many applications you go through, or someone asked that. It's not so much people finding out, because people tend to find out about this through ads, through community outreach, which a lot of us do, but it's filling out the application properly. A lot of people fill out the application improperly and either don't qualify on the face of the application, or don't respond when they're given a notice that they have to respond to the fact that they don't qualify. And I think education and outreach in that respect is very important. And some of the nonprofits are
Martin?
very,
One of the challenges can also be someone can have not enough income to qualify, meaning that to afford the apartment, they'd have to pay 40% of their income towards the rent. And they'll say, but right now I'm paying 55% of my income towards rent. What do you mean I can't pay 40%? But we're often limited to keeping them affordable, so maybe we can go up to 35%.
Right.
But you know, it can be hard on a lot of people who are paying so much more right now, and this would be affordable comparative to their current apartment, but it doesn't meet the affordability standards.
I was going to say, it's a little bit the example of the perfect is the enemy of the good here. You have so much attempt to do the right thing, namely to rent to households who are verifiable, for whom poverty isn't a choice, really, that you end up having to assemble so much information and squeeze into such tight bands before you even meet the household or do a credit screen.
Right.
And determine their suitability.
And now I ask that capitalistic question. Why do you, and why do you, and why do you, and you specifically, why do you build these affordable apartments? Why are you being such a wonderful community citizen to provide these apartments? I mean, and Matt, part of the reason, why did you give away 20% of your units? Why are you giving 20%? What's in it for you?
Well, I mean, there's economics, first of all. And
let's explain what the economics are, team. And you know, I haven't had enough interaction. I really get upset. You know, I need a little more interaction.
Well, on the economic front, at least I can speak to the 80/20s. There's the 421A tax abatement, which is essentially a 20-year tax phase-in.
So the developer gets a 20-year tax abatement or a phase-in on the taxes, on the real estate taxes.
Yes.
For helping out and providing these apartments.
Correct.
So that's one benefit. What other benefits do you get when you're building affordable housing, Martin?
We get, I mean, to do 100% affordable projects like we do, we get all sorts of subsidies, from federal low-income housing tax credits to government loans.
So you're doing something.
You're asking different questions, the same question to very different projects.
That's exactly right, and I want to.
But it's not relevant why he's doing affordable and why he's doing.
But he's doing affordable, from what I hear, because of the taxes.
Partially.
Partially for the
there's
taxes.
multiple programs.
And what's the other
You
purpose?
receive a low-income housing tax credit, which is a credit against your federal tax return.
Would you sell?
Or keep and use. It's more valuable to keep and use as long as you can, which is usually the case. A lot of people sell them or use it as a form of equity. In addition to the 421A tax abatement.
And low interest rate.
And low interest rate
And
bonds.
we float bonds. These are public bonds. They're triple tax exempt. And the bond rate is very low. Those three components make it economically viable
So it's the
to
offset.
provide the 20% affordable
So it's the
housing.
offset over there to provide.
But the reason that developers like Matt are doing affordable housing is in the context of a market rate job. So your benefits are benefits that come by producing affordable housing in the context of a market rate project, as opposed to guys who do affordable housing, 100% affordable, like Adam, Martin, and myself.
But you do both. You do.
I do both. But the benefits for 100% affordable housing are there to get the housing built, and we do it for different reasons. There are economic reasons why we do it as well, but they're...
Why economically, Ron? I mean, if you had to...
Well, economically,
I'm not
the
asking
reason...
as a
I mean,
joke.
because your question is very different to these guys on an 80/20 than it is to us as a pure affordable housing.
But let's try to broach that, because I'm then going to get to condominiums where there are also tax
Right.
advantages and other things.
I mean, I decided to got into affordable housing about 15 years ago for three primary reasons. One, it's a business that doesn't require a huge amount of capital expenditure or risk on a market side, which is, when you're starting out in the business, is important. Two, it's intellectually, I find very challenging, and something that I find also that I'm morally comfortable with. I like what I do. When I started out, I interviewed all the tenants who lived in my buildings. I felt I was doing something that was good, that was worthwhile, that was producing.
You know, in my
And three,
roles, I feel
well,
good looking at it.
I'm finishing the third one. And three, you can make money doing it. I've made a good living. I do very well economically. So it's a combination of doing something you're morally comfortable with, that you're intellectually challenged, and that you can make money is not a bad way to live your life. So.
And there's more opportunities to make money now. I mean, it
There's
used to
more
be,
money to make up money in the affordable today than there were before, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back a ways, the only people that were doing it in the outer boroughs were nonprofit community development groups, because there just wasn't that much economic.
Well, historically, that's not really true. I think
I'm going
we are
back in
today,
the,
where
10,
we are,
15
where we were
years.
25 years ago in the last boom cycle, which is really a time when builder developers, because ultimately the housing that Ron's building, or affordable housing that Phipps owns, that Martin's doing, there's not much intrinsic value to $10 a foot in rent. There just isn't.
Okay,
the real estate
no,
itself is not the value.
wait. Oh, hold on. Let's get to the subject of rent, of $10. You just said to me that, to me, a 1,000 square foot apartment at $10 means they're paying $10,000 a year.
$800.
$10,000 a year,
800.
or $833 a month for a two-bedroom apartment. Correct?
Correct.
Now, $850. I just want to give some explanation. An apartment, Matt, in the building on 6th Avenue, the Ashton, was at how much? I'm not talking the affordable. I'm talking the market rate.
Market rate? Well, current rates are in the mid-60s, $65 a foot.
So it's $65 a foot for 1,000 square feet, means a two-bedroom apartment would be $65,000, which is about $5,300 a month. Now, Dennis, you have two buildings that you developed as condominiums, luxury condominiums, one on East 88th Street and one on 1st Avenue and 52nd Street.
51st.
51st, with the Dwayne Reed over there where I pick up my water in the morning.
Good. We like our tenants to do well.
Yes, if they opened on time, they'd even do better. But
I'll take care of that for you, Mike.
so you're charging. He's at 65 over there, and you're charging in your two buildings.
Let me preface my conversation. I have all the regard and respect for affordable housing developers.
He's not affordable.
It is not, no, I don't talk about Matt, okay? Talking about the gentleman at the end. But I'm morally comfortable what we do as well.
Wait,
And
no, please. This is not a moral. I'm trying to give a perspective to people. This is not a moral thing. So your apartments, 1,000.
We're catering to the other end of the marketplace.
That's exactly why I have this group of distinct different individuals. So you're at what, 80 to 100?
We cater at 80 to 120, $125 a foot.
So somebody, if there were 1,000, but you don't have 1,000 square foot units, you have 2,000 units, they would be paying 80,000 a year to
2,000 square foot unit would be approximately anywhere from $160,000 a year to $250,000 a year.
That's a different market. And then Damon, you have, besides the new building over there, you have the Victory, which is on 10th Avenue and 41st Street. You have the Chesapeake on 1st Avenue and 94th Street.
Yep.
And what is somebody paying over there?
On the low end of the range is 90, call it $42 a foot, and we go up to $50 a foot in those two buildings in terms.
So
of
we're at $42,000 a year. I mean, all I'm trying to say is that there are people living in all different ranges, and I guarantee you that many people, not in your apartments, but many people in your building, are paying more than 30% of their income.
Absolutely.
To live in this apartment, which is what the statistics.
And ours are definitely not. Okay.
Yeah, but that's
because it's
a
you just onto a
different
high
market.
rental.
It's a
The more you make, the more you can spend as a percentage on your housing, because the more the
Discretionary
balance,
income.
yeah,
That's right.
the more the
Right.
balance.
And the idea is people, but you know, it's great to have luxury housing and all this others, but unless we have affordable or market rate type of affordable housing, the working class, the working people.
Well, that's where the hard squeeze is in some respects. And I know, a number of us, Ron included, and on some of Phipps's developments, we're trying to provide more in the way of mixed income. There's a lot of territory between $10 a foot
absolutely.
and 65, let alone 100.
But as New York
a
is a
foot.
diversified city in every aspect, it's just as important to have the high end as it is the
The
affordable.
problem is that, for the stuff that we do, there's a great incentive there's financial incentive, subsidy, really, available to a certain
60%,
stratum of the
60%.
marketplace.
What's interesting and what drives the market is that in every one of these product types, $10, $120, $65, there's fundamentally a shortage of housing.
Correct.
There's no question. I was doing some review before. Developers built 125,000 homes in Manhattan from 1985 to 1991. Then we had the stock market crash, severe recession, and the median prices fell 45%. Since 1991, builders have only put up 13,700 units, 1/10 of the number of the houses. We don't have enough houses. 800,000 people.
Since 1991 till when?
1999 to the present time. In
That doesn't
Manhattan.
sound-
In Manhattan.
In Manhattan.
In Manhattan. I mean, this is some.
Well,
it's not,
but Brooklyn is the
Doesn't
new
sound like to
Manhattan.
me.
I think.
That doesn't sound right.
But I think that
13,000 units built
in Manhattan since 1999.
Well, the good news is, Michael, you've got 25 to 30,000 new units coming online in Manhattan.
Yeah,
over
but
the
now
next,
let's talk about it. We
2
have
years.
23. That's right. This year, 16,000 new units were built in Manhattan, and 23,700 units are planned for 2006. Who's going to buy those units? Who can afford to buy those units, and what type of units are being built in Manhattan?
I think it's going to be a challenge for many of the projects out there right now, as far as people being able to afford $1,200 to $1,500 a foot. And I truly don't believe that every building in Manhattan is going to be worth $1,200 to $1,500 a foot. We've gotten some of the highest prices in our sector over the years, and there are not as many buyers at the upper stratosphere. We won't get 39,000 applications for 60 apartments at $1,500 a foot. In fact, you want to be at 390.
Those numbers, there's not 25,000 housing starts in any given year in Manhattan. So that's a cumulative number. For the projects that
No, the 23.7 is in New York City for next year.
all 5 boroughs?
All 5 boroughs.
From a Manhattan standpoint, we have housing starts typically from 3,000 to 5,000 housing starts in Manhattan per year. Those are good years for Manhattan. It's rarely more, and it's, as you said, prior to the late 90s, we had 1,000, 1,500 housing starts. For the jobs that are out there, whether they're for rent or for sale, that are legally allowed to sell, whether they're in the ground or not, most of the projects are subscribed to. There's very little unsold or unrented inventory in the market. The question will be how many jobs go forward on the faith of this current market cycle. And I suspect a lot of them won't. And I think Dennis is right that to some extent those that do go forward, the better products, better developed, better conceived, will survive, do well, whereas some of the lesser products will get caught short.
But, now let's try to focus. Damon's building a brand new large luxury project, 60 stories, which you've acquired. I mean, it's in partnerships with the
Durst organization and the Friars themselves.
And then you're also building on 110th
and 5th.
110th and 5th. Now, Ron, you're building up in Harlem, Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and the Bronx. Martin, you're building in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Adam?
Harlem, Lower East Side, the Bronx.
And the Bronx. I don't hear Queens.
We have one site that we're playing with in Queens, but
fine. But
in truth, the zoning's not right in a lot of.
But isn't that
Queens
part
and
of our
Brooklyn.
problem in the city? We have a zoning situation that goes back to 1961 or even worse. I mean, fortunately, as you said, all of us said before, the administration has really done a great job by rezoning Williamsburg and other parts in the Hudson Yards. But, you know, we need this housing over there. But I'm trying to get to a different point. The cost to build today has gone up so much. You're building this skyscraper, and prior to the show we said, what is the cost to build? The cost to build for your property is what, $260 a foot?
We were very happy in today's market to build for $260.
For $260 a foot. Martin, you're building today in the Bronx.
Projects in construction were at about mid 130s. Projects were about to start mid 140s, and the projects we're budgeting going forward 150, 152.
Matt, you built three properties over the last couple of years, and you have another one planned on Avenue, the 6th Avenue in the Flower District, which you were responsible for the rezoning. How much did you pay then, and how much do you think it's going to cost you to build this new building you're building?
Well, we were all in. You're speaking about hard costs.
Hard costs, the construction hard costs.
On the first project, we were all in at $170 a foot.
And that was, what, 5 years ago?
4.5. Wow. Now we're running numbers for new rentals. I'd run numbers like Damon is at $260 to $290. For condominium development, which is often smaller scale, so the economy of scale changes and some of your absolute costs skew your square foot costs. But we run numbers anywhere from $340 to $390 a foot.
And Ron?
Well, the work we're doing in the boroughs, the affordable housing, the typical block and plank, mid-rise construction, we're in the same 150 range.
And what about Schaefer's Crossing, which I want to explain?
Well, Schaefer was probably in the 180 range, but the work we're doing now on the Williamsburg waterfront, we're closer to the 280 range.
No, wait. Isn't Schaefer's on the Williamsburg waterfront?
Yeah. You know, part of the disparity in these numbers is the type of construction.
Right.
What we do is high-rise, reinforced concrete, and your plank jobs are mid-rise.
Right, no, but
they're very different costs.
But you know, and I think what I'm trying, and Dennis, I felt when you did the last job at the
3.5, 4 years ago, we were looking at about $250 a foot, which was certainly high in the marketplace. But we do bring out a different product. Today, we're looking at larger type products to bring our construction costs down to somewhere in the $350 range.
So,
I know of a project on Park Avenue. It's not a large project. That's going to run somewhere around $600 a foot. It's small, so the larger the product, at least you have some saving grace, hopefully.
But you know, so what I'm trying to get an idea, and I have a construction cost between $120 to a construction cost of $300, $350. I have to buy that land. Now, land costs money. With the exception that 2 days ago, the city, there was a program called the Cornerstone Program, which was similar to the Anchor Program, where you were able to get the land given to you, basically for $1.
They were asking for bids.
They were asking for bids, but you were able to get the property for $1.
For
I know, you know, I'm going to be writing an article, you know, the best bargain around, $1 to get a piece of land. But today, in the Bronx, what's land in the South Bronx going for?
We're paying $30 a buildable foot.
$30, and a couple of years ago, it was $5 a buildable foot.
Right. There's still, look, there is a city of opportunity, and there are still, the magic of rezoning creates land. And there are certainly underbuilt sites. It's ironic to think of a place like Stuytown as being underbuilt, but it is. It's underbuilt the zoning. There are
are you saying? And I think that's a very interesting point.
There's New York City Housing Authority, and again, you know,
are we going to rip down the New York City housing projects?
No,
which we should perhaps in many cases.
Well, but you are going to see some consideration of which public resources are available to create mixed income communities, and one of those great resources, actually a great unsung hero of New York City, is the New York City Housing Authority, which has soldiered on over 75 years with 180,000 apartments, and came to acquire a bunch of apartments, 30 years ago when no one else wanted to acquire them, that are underutilized. And I think this administration will make available underutilized public housing for redevelopment.
You're talking about the land, the excess FAR on the land.
Excess
that the public
FAR,
housing is on.
parking lots that are underdeveloped.
No inside baseball. Excess.
People are saying there's a million. There might be a billion square feet of undeveloped
so we're saying, for example,
housing authority land.
And I think some of the good example is Stuyvesant Town, which when you were trying to say Stuytown, was built on a large lot. And if you looked at the property today, if you have to move the parking over certain other zoning changes, you could probably build more towers on the sites, which is what's happening with the Bethany Village up in Harlem and some other sites. So you take that property, you get some changing in the zoning, and you're able to build some.
I'll give you a precise example. Phipps Houses owns a property in the East 20s where we have an excess lot. And with remaining contextual with existing zoning, but with a slight change in the text that is actually applying to a different site elsewhere in the city, we can develop new 50,000 square foot building, 50 units of affordable housing in the East 20s in Manhattan, and we will. It's a very valuable market site. One way to finance it potentially is to sell inclusionary air rights to folks who are developing market-rate housing
But I'd
somewhere
like
else.
to bring out the subject. Yes, Martin.
I was going to say, I mean, the challenge for affordable housing has been land prices have gone up,
Right.
construction prices have gone up, operating costs have gone up, and incomes have been stagnant. Median incomes have been stagnant in New York City. You have all this upward pressure, which has meant the cities had to put more and more subsidy into affordable housing deals to make them work. So you got to bring the cost of construction down, and there's regulatory ideas out there in doing that. You got to bring the cost of land down. Rezoning is one way to do that. There's other possibilities. There's not much you can do on operating costs. I mean, the city doesn't have it in their control to bring down utility costs. But
you know what?
But rezoning, we can't build to the old density neighborhoods. Mostly where we're building is people have. We're building on blocks where tenement buildings were knocked down. Building to the same height as the old buildings, we're building half the square footage because they were building with almost no backyards and little air courts. So we're building, we're replacing half of the bulk that these neighborhoods have because we have to stay within height limits.
But
so
aren't we also losing a lot of houses because a lot of these market rate rentals, not the affordable rentals, the Mitchell-Lama properties have become condominiums. New York City is condominiumized. Nearly every apartment house, this year alone, you had the Manhattan house sold for $620 million. It's planned to be condoed. All of these buildings are being planned to be condominiumized. We don't have housing, and that's what you're saying. You want to take
condominiums are housing, and actually, in terms of total product, it's neutral to take an apartment that's for rent and sell it. It's still an apartment. It's giving somebody a home. It's a question of which income strata we're trying to satisfy. The condominium buyer, presumably, is more affluent, given the price point of condominiums today, as opposed to, say, a Mitchell-Lama program. But we're not actually adding volume to the market as a result. Clearly, we're going to have an increasing shortage of rental housing, certainly at all levels, and I think in particular at the market rate level. And we're going to see rents spike. They already have, but they're going to continue to spike.
I heard the term inclusionary zoning, and I'd like to get to this subject of inclusionary zoning with regard to Williamsburg and other parts of the city. Last May, after a variety of confrontations, agreements, disagreements, there was a rezoning. Discussions, there was a rezoning of Williamsburg. And there are plans for, 11,000 new units?
Probably more than that, but yeah.
At least 11,000 new units. And a portion of those new units, and I think it's really a very interesting program. I don't want to age myself, but I remember maybe it was the Brooklyn Dodgers, there was Schaefer Beer. And Schaefer Beer, they went out of business, the F&M Schaefer Brewery, and in Williamsburg, you and your partners, Mr. Kaposher and Allstate Real Estate, built a combination of. Why don't you tell my audience what you did?
Well, Schaefer was the first job on in the Williamsburg area on the Brooklyn waterfront, where we, I think 4.5 years ago, we acquired the land from the city, and we agreed to build 40% affordable housing. For families, 1 to 5 bedroom
So you built, if I remember, 250 condominiums?
210 condominiums, 140 rental units.
So you built 210 condominiums, which started at that time for approximately $500,000. Was the cheapest condominium?
No, actually, there was some under $300,000. But the condominiums were a pioneering effort. In fact, when I first got involved, the affordable housing was the attraction, because at least we knew that would work.
And so
we weren't sure about
now
the
40% of the units were affordable housing.
Right.
And you were saying to me prior to the show and during our discussion, these apartments ranged in size from 1 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms?
Yes.
And the average, and the people, these are rental properties, and you were doing condominiums, and they could earn, a family of 4, or whatever the number, the size over there, could earn up to what, 60%?
$62,800.
No, a family of 4 was limited to 60% of the median, which was approximately $35,000 a year.
And this was the lottery that 27,000 people applied.
35,000.
35,000 people over there. And those apartments.
There's 140 happy people and a lot of unhappy people.
There are 100. Now you, because of the change in the zoning, and I want everybody to explain what inclusionary, now you and Martin are building another property in Williamsburg, and you're building the affordable component.
We're developing it together. It's actually going to be built union along the waterfront, so neither of us are building it.
So explain to my audience what you're doing over there on Palmer's Dock.
Well, the rezoning required that to get zoning bonuses, both height and bulk, on the waterfront, you had to do a certain amount of affordable housing.
Okay, explain to the audience, what do you mean by zoning bonuses?
So if you wanted to get an extra 5 stories, you get extra floors, extra 7 stories.
So how many? So you can get 7 extra stories. So if I have a building which is
23 stories.
23 stories, I can go up to 30 stories.
Right.
If I go off-site or on-site and build what we would call inclusionary?
Almost all of it has to be built on-site because of the 421A.
It's
There's
more
also
about
a
square
tax
footage
exemption.
than stories as
Correct.
well.
Okay, so
Well, in this area, it's both. In Manhattan, it's all about square footage.
and Manhattan,
Williamsburg,
You get a height bonus
There's
as well as a
specific,
footage
there's
bonus.
specific
so
height
right
limitations.
now,
Just looking at the height.
you're going to be building condominiums in one section of the property, and jointly you're going to be building market affordable apartments where people can earn up to 60%.
We actually have a whole range. One
80%.
of the concerns of Ben is when you say it's only for one income level, there might be people that
So
earn
it's the
within
new hawk,
5.
there'll be the 40%, the 60%,
No,
and
it's
the
all.
80%?
It's 30% of median, 40% of median, 50% of median, 60% of median, and 80% of median. It makes it much more complicated.
It sounds like I'm going to McDonald's. Do I want to,
Richard,
hold the pickles, hold the ketchup?
one of the issues, Mike, at Schaefer that the community had concerns about, there were a lot of applications, and I think it was mentioned earlier, most of the 35,000 applicants didn't make enough money to afford the rents. Even though it was affordable housing and the rents are the $10 a foot Adam mentioned, a lot of people who were applying couldn't afford the rents and were not able to get apartments there because they didn't make enough money. So one of the things the community pushed for was a mix of incomes.
One of the other problems is sometimes you can be in the affordable housing category, but be making a little too much for the particular slice that's available, such as you're in the 30% category, there's 20% housing available, and you can't qualify as well.
Right.
So there's this push to widen the range, so almost try to get seamless. So no matter where your income is, under $40,000, you'd fit in somehow. And that's what we're doing.
That's why it takes so many applications to satisfy the requirements, because somebody who needs this housing could be making too little or a little too much.
Look, the good news is, though, the good news, if there is good news, is that these are all momentary things. In other words, these are all at a moment in time you're measuring someone's household income. So long as there's a continuing production pipeline of housing, people's household incomes at the lower tier of the market, and even at the higher tier of the market, change every year. It's changed drastically. The housing is permanently restricted, or not permanently, but it's long-term restricted.
So let's
So
say
you might find households marketed to Ron's building, as Ron said, there are 34,880 or 860 unhappy people, probably who are reapplying for Palmer's or Martin's building in the Bronx or Matthews buildings on 6th Avenue.
Or maybe they'll go to Damon's new building over there.
I mean, the goal, of course, for the affordable housing developers is that they wind up in Dennis's building, but those are needles in a haystack.
We'd love to have you. And, we'll be happy to give you a showing right after the show.
But wait, so that's something that's happening in Williamsburg. Then there's something called the affordable condominiums or the affordable cooperatives that you're building on 116th Street and Lenox Avenue, the Kalahari.
Well, the city is. You mentioned, I think, someone mentioned the Cornerstone program.
I mentioned.
And the cornerstone of the Cornerstone program is home ownership for the most part, although not exclusively, but also the ability to. The city is, I think, in a very innovative manner, used land that it owns in areas where there is a home ownership market to parlay that not into necessarily dollars for the land. You mentioned the price of the land is very attractive, not free, but attractive. But in return, we're giving back, in this case, half of the apartments at below market or well below market rates. In fact, we lose money on a number of the apartments because we're costing us maybe $300,000 to build it, and we're selling it for, say, $150,000. And that's sort of the quid
But I think
pro
that was
quo.
the same idea in the 80-20. The 80-20, you're losing money really on those rentals,
That's right.
but you're making it back on the other side.
That's right.
They're
There are economic benefits.
Making more than it back.
Yeah,
I
I never look at it as losing money on the 80-20 side. I look at it as a package of benefits versus costs, and we think that it's an advantageous program. It also serves a public purpose.
The difference between the 80-20 and the mixed income is we're basically getting city land, and even though the city's not subsidizing any of those apartments, we're basically getting city land, and in return for getting the city land at a below market price, we're making a deal up front, and we're required to live by that. Whereas in an 80-20, you own the land, and you're making an economic evaluation of whether you want to do 100% of market rate or 20% affordable.
I'd like to flow this stream because you're
forth.
doing this property, which is right off 5th Avenue and 116th Street. Damon, you're doing a property on 5th Avenue
And 110.
and 110th. Pretty close by. Now, you're doing what?
We're doing a partnership with Beekman Associates, and you're going to have a 4-story museum in the base, Museum of African Art, and then it'll be market rate condominiums above, starting really on the 5th floor. There'll be 135 to 140 of them. So it's straight market, same neighborhood, a very similar neighborhood.
And what are you projecting on? And you have no restrictions.
We have
no restrictions like Ron has certain restrictions, but there's a different land cost. There's certain other factors in there. You're not doing bond. This is a bond deal as opposed to
It's not a bond deal, but we are.
You're doing condos, right?
We're doing condos, but we are. There is a significant public and community benefit associated with
building
the museum.
Right.
That's right.
The museum is really a critical.
That's the community access spaces.
Yeah,
Yeah, but this is the objective. The objective is to create, marketplaces, other marketplaces other than Central Business District, Manhattan, East Side, West Side, where unsubsidized housing can take place. I mean, a lot of us are building housing where that's not the case, and the government sacrifices money up front, lowers Ron's, beta, lowers his risk, lowers Martin's risk, lowers my risk, and although our equations are a little different somewhat, to
encourage
develop
development
this.
in
No, I
areas
think
that
the
housing.
encourage. I think
And,
the
we all
encouraging
seem
of
like
development-
geniuses, or those of us who've sort of used this incentive program over the past 5 to 7 years, right? As you said, the original reason for developing Schaefer was to do the affordable housing because there was a very heavy subsidy of the affordable housing, as appropriate. Who was going to live in Schaefer,
I mean, Harlem is a perfect look.
Harlem's another- Harlem's
His
another
job
example.
is able to be market rate because I think the city, 5-6 years ago, I mean, we were one of the first. I think Jeff Levine did one. They encouraged by light subsidies and land disposition, the development of home ownership and middle income housing in areas where it didn't exist. And as it got built up, it enabled others to come and follow with market rate development. Now there's a thriving market in northern Manhattan.
Adam makes a very good point because in our end of the world there is risk involved. There's a high degree of capital that's required. Projects today are running anywhere from $200 to $300 million, and there is risk involved. If there's a change in the marketplace, if something should happen that affects the markets for any reason, whether it's the economy or outside forces, it certainly has a detrimental effect upon our product, and there is a lot of risk involved. I'm not sure. I'd rather not be on the other side of the
I
fence
think
over here.
the idea of why I brought all this this group of different people is to talk about the different perspectives. I mean, and I like bringing the perspective on what you're doing on 110th Street, and you're on 100. You're a couple of blocks away. Now, in order for you to build a portion of that, you're taking away some of your profit to give back to the community, and people are going to be able to buy a condominium, a cooperative, right?
Condominium.
A condominium in a really nice neighborhood. 116th Street is doing great, right next to 1400 Fifth Avenue, and people are going to buy over your place. Now, your place, which is close to Duke Ellington Circle and everything else, is closer to the park and certain other areas, and you'll probably, hopefully, get $800 a foot, $800 to $900. And Ron, you on your open market, you'll get $500 a foot.
Well, we're hoping to get $600
$600 a foot. $600 a foot.
We're not undersell yet.
And
Don't sign up at those.
no, and the lucky people who go into the lottery, because there's also a lottery, they'll be able to buy that unit, some of them for not $600 a foot, right, for like $200 a foot.
Right.
I mean, some people will be lucky, and if they, go to the website or they go to the, see the notices, they can look at it. I mean, these people, it's really, it's wonderful that these programs have been implemented. And that, I'd like to just get to the situation. When Dennis built the condominium a couple years ago, you built, you didn't have the capability of building inclusionary, but you got the tax benefits. You bought something called the 421A.
We bought 421A certificates,
right,
and we would have bought inclusionary, but there was nothing available in the district. Basically, it has to be in the same district if you're bringing in inclusionary housing.
Right. So within a half a
You should have
mile.
called us.
But a competitor of yours did build an inclusionary nearby, and he gave it to Met Council for Jewish poverty. I
Correct.
think.
I wouldn't call him a competitor. He's a friendly friend.
No,
a friendly competitor.
Another alternative.
There are no competitors here. They're only friendly friends.
Right. Another alternative, depending on the building's type, in particular, if you have an 80-20, you can build on your own market rate within the building inclusionary housing and qualify similarly so. The ratios are slightly different.
Right. The Worldwide Development did that with the Milan.
We did that with the Aspen as well.
Oh, you
We
did
built
that?
the inclusionary
We did that with the
on-site.
Victory.
It's all
Really?
The Victory is really
it's all a
25
function of
to
land
75.
cost.
Well, it's harder to do. It's easier in a rental than in a condo. I think it's very tough to do in a condo.
Right, but those are
difficult
rentals.
condo.
Yes.
See, what Milan did worldwide on 55th Street is they built the condominium on 2nd Avenue, and then on 54th Street, on the former site of the El Morocco, they built an affordable component, an inclusionary, where they gave it to a not-for-profit, so they were able to take two separate entrances, two separate areas, which is a very unusual market, but that's how the site just worked out over there.
Also, Ron made an interesting point about the affordable housing investments the city makes sometimes have impacts far beyond who they're serving. You look at a neighborhood like East New York. I spent 5 years doing community revitalization in East New York when it was setting murder records. We had 129 murders in 1993. The city put a huge amount of money in serving people. I don't think we had a rent in a building above $500. Now they're building unsized two-family homes for $400,000. I mean, so the investment of affordable housing that stabilized neighborhoods also led to a huge real estate boom that's serving has brought an economic mix into the neighborhood. So, housing investment for affordable housing has a much greater impact, which I think this administration's acknowledged and has embraced.
The same thing's true in the South Bronx. I think this administration has done a great job of really focusing on that and encouraging development in Manhattan, luxury development, because there is a need for that, but also encouraging development in the boroughs through various.
So I have a question. What happens if the market turns? What happens to all of us?
You guys,
It's
I don't develop. I
It's
want to know.
It's good for affordable housing developers. It's
It's
not
not
good
necessarily, by the way.
It's not necessarily.
Because
right.
programs like 428 certificates, which inclusionary,
Are pro-cyclical.
which are much larger programs, and they're becoming more irrelevant, are going to have bigger problems. I think land costs may go down, so in that sense it may
But
help.
people's incentive to sell, I mean, that lot that you were buying to assemble your publicly, mostly publicly owned site, right now it's easy to encourage the owner to sell. Now, I'm worried a little bit in 5 years when small, long-time landlord is thinking, I'll hold on for the next cycle.
But you know what?
My basis is
I think
zero.
what Adam is saying, and I think if you did an analysis of the latest condominium developments in Manhattan, most of them are done with inclusionary zoning, which allows for the 20% density, so they can build 20% higher, and every one of them is done with a 421A certificate.
Right. I mean,
which
my
is
new
a tax
condominium
You've got to
has
qualify
both
for
of
the
those
421A.
programs.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Everything qualifies, including Trump. Trump got the
They
qualification.
don't, well,
We tried.
not everything qualifies. They may all get the certificates.
That's very
You know
it's a
what?
tricky
When that-
program.
It's
But-
actually tough. It's tougher than you think. If you're not building, if you're not replacing 4 times the number of units on the site, you can't qualify.
Correct.
I mean, we could not qualify at 90 East End Avenue for that reason.
So 90 East End Avenue, you weren't able to get a tax abatement?
No,
Why?
because there was
There's a whole
there
book
was
of rules.
there was brownstones that were there. They had that were compartmentalized and had a lot of units, and the apartments that we built were large apartments. So the numbers didn't work. It wasn't 4 times large apartments that were
There are
the
3 areas you
studios
have
that
to
were
qualify
replaced.
in. Okay, one is what Damon mentioned, which is 4 times. I'm not familiar with the other 2. You can talk to our Suchere lawyer on Monday and
you
get
know,
you the
my-
answer.
it's-
my
the
question is,
percentage
I
value
think
Not every
Adam
site qualifies.
Adam brings up,
Side.
So where do you see the next development? Where do you see the next market rate housing affordable? Do you see a lot of it? I know, Ron, you're building in the Bronx. I think even some market rate. You're an affordable. That's your business.
It's not really a pure. It's a not-for-profit.
It's
But
not-for-profit.
I do think that there is a potential. I mean, look, the Bronx has not had multifamily home ownership. It's not been the type. So there are and there's a lot of 2 and 3 family home development in the Bronx, and the population that's serving are typically New York immigrant population. Maybe not the same as 40 years ago, but still immigrant population. But I think there is an opportunity in some pockets of neighborhoods that you would never have thought of as multifamily home ownership, condo co-op ownership. And we'll experiment gingerly, I'd have to say, given the risk. There is enormous risk. It's all.
It's going to take some government subsidies early on. There's
Yes,
not
it is.
there's not comparable sales.
The interesting thing is when you experiment in areas like Harlem was 5 or 6 years ago, or the South Bronx now, and the government puts subsidy, they limit your upside. So you're really limited to a development fee. So the experimentation has to be careful because you really don't have a lot of room for error in that.
From the market rate side, I'm looking at the market going forward as very project specific. I think the market is, obviously it's very strong, it's been strong for a while. I'm not looking at things so much as I want a certain amount of apartments to build or sell as much as it's site specific, much more narrowly than I ever used to look at it. Certain sites will set up, whether it be price or location, and I'll pull the trigger on that, whereas a few years ago I might have decided to buy a variety of sites simply because I thought the market was going to continue to escalate.
We're all affected by the same market. If the market goes south, maybe not the affordable housing where you're getting thousands of people for every apartment, but every aspect of the market other than affordable housing is certainly subject to the market. Whether
You
you're a
think?
Fifth Avenue
I
building.
mean, I brought up the the question about Williamsburg because everybody hears Williamsburg. Do you think there may be an overbuilt situation in Williamsburg
Well,
eventually?
it's funny. Right now, there's not much being built at all because the rezoning just occurred. So there will be obviously building going on there. It's going to take a while for people to get plans done, get in the ground. There's a lot of people who own who are looking to sell. But again, it's a very undeveloped area up till now. And
Hey, I mean, if you
think
want
it's
to
really-
right now
talk
it's
about
about-
undeveloped, when Matt and his
Hudson
family,
Yards.
had the rezoning of Chelsea, the flower market, look at it today. I mean, when you started over there, Matt, you didn't have $65 square foot rents. I mean, Chelsea is one of the hottest neighborhoods over here. We have, timing is everything. As
We
a
used to
couple
get paid in flowers.
got paid in flowers. You know, a couple of years ago, I did a show north of 96th Street, and Naomi Baer of Fannie Mae and Debbie Wright of Carver said, when we tried to do comps, we were unable to get comps because there was nothing built. And the same situation, the Bronx didn't have anything built. I realize it's hard for you to believe, but we've spent 59 minutes talking about different aspects of residential development in New York City. And I think my audience gained a lot of insight about things that nobody has really discussed in the past. I'd really like to thank my guest this evening for appearing. Martin Dunn, President of Dunn Development, Damon Pasolini of Senior Vice President and Partner at Sidney Fettner Associates, Dennis Herman, Managing Member, Beekman International, Adam Weinstein, President of Phipps Houses, I'm not giving the rest of it, Matt Adele, President of Delco, and definitely last but not least, Ron Moelis, Partner at L&M Equity Participants. Next month, we're going to do an interesting show. I have people coming in from Canada and other parts in the country. We're going to talk, where do industry leaders see 2006? Boom, bubble, prices going up. It should be a very interesting show. Thank you very much.
Funding for the Stoller Report is made possible by a grant from the First American Title Insurance Company of New York. The First American Corporation is the nation's leading diversified provider of business information products and services that impact the major events of people's lives.